All right, welcome to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead, pour white lightning straight onto your brain. And today we should be, hopefully, probably, almost certainly wrapping up the Great Hunt. We have kind of reached the climax of things, and let's see. Yeah, we left off with the girls because they were about to leave the tower. Yep, because we did the what might be, and we're on chapter 38. And so,
Well, and I forgot to look ahead of what happened to the. Oh, I know what happened to the girls. Never mind.
yeah,
This is actually how could I forget? This is kind of important. But other than that, there's only a couple thoughts on the ending I have, so we will definitely be able to get through the end.
well, I just wanted to point out in a meta sense that what's going on here is Jordan needs all of his characters to come to a certain one certain point for the very end of the book. But it's not contrived in any way. It's not, well, this is dumb. Why are they doing this? It makes sense why they're all going there. We even talked about, or they mention in the book of why would Fane take the horn to Tolman Head? There's war there, and as Varen says, people like him can see opportunity in the chaos of war. So even his going there makes sense. And so obviously Rand and his group going there makes sense. And now the girls are going there because someone very bad knows how to manipulate them, knows how to push their buttons, and wants to get them there to get them out of the way. And because she's been ordered to do so by Dark Friend higher ups, because they want to get rid of these connections to Rand. They want to pull away his support structure, so he is easier to bring to the shadow or destroy.
Well, all of us that have been in a workplace that's expansive in any way and has a hierarchy going up. Most of us have had the experience where you're coming in as the new person, and if you show any talent, someone further up the ladder will use you to their advantage. Sometimes that works out for you, but sometimes you're the cannon fodder. But the more talented you are, the more useful you are. And I know I've experienced it in the workplace. So I think that kind of is the dynamic going on here. Leandrin is using these young kids for her advantage. She just, I don't even think at this point she understands why these particular people are important. I think she just knows that they have some sort of connection to other people that she wants to work against. So,
well, she's been ordered. That's because her and Suroth are working together because they've both been ordered to get Eqwene and Nyneave. And Leandrin mentions when she's talking to Suroth that you have to get these two particularly away. You need to send them off with the next ships leaving this, so that someone, presumably Balsamon, since he's the one who kind of runs the Dark Friend network, he wants these two gone.
I need to get a new one.
Yeah, probably.
at least visual effect in the
I don't know if you have any other thoughts on these two chapters here. Actually, more than that, because they go through the Waygate, and then so a couple of chapters of them in the tower.
Well, we'll go back to the meta again, the metaphysical this time. They go through a Waygate to get where they need to go. So that is another indicator that Machin Shin can sense, because they had no problems. They just went. No hiccups at all. And theoretically, Machin Shin can sense anybody in the ways and will make its way towards that. And they were in the ways for however long. and Machin Shin just keeps being near Rand every time. So
Yeah, there's something in him that's strong enough that it pulls him. Um, so it's not a lot of time, but because it's just part of this chapter where Egwene gets collared, and then we'll see her again in in the stables where they keep all the Nominee. And kudos to Jordan for writing this so uncomfortably. I don't want to read it.
yes, and there's also parallel here too, because one of the themes that I think a lot of people miss with these books is the parallel between Egwene and Rand. They're not connected romantically later, but they are connected. And this experience for Egwene is very similar to something Rand goes through later. And they actually come out of it a lot the same, which actually makes them better leaders later on. It's a growing pain. It's very much a growing pain, but
and it causes problems before it strengthens them. It's kind of, we talked before about the analogy, the difference between hard and strong, that hard iron is very hard, but it can be very brittle if you hit it just the right way. So she's going to come out of it very brittle. And it takes her some time to internalize those lessons without it, being like a raw nerve, like an exposed nerve. Because it's not just, and it gets to her what they're doing. Because at the end there, kind of the last scene I think we see of her when she's talking to Min, about how they're going to send her away now because they've discovered she has this talent with earth and with metals that most women don't have. And she felt pleased that her Soldam was pleased. And she recognized that, and she hated it because it's not just that she's being tortured, she's being psychologically conditioned.
Yeah. And this is like the old, whether it's true or not, the old Stalin story where he pulls the chicken out, plucks it right in front of everybody while it's alive, and tortures this thing, and it's in pain, it's being tortured, and then he starts throwing out some barley, and the chicken starts pecking it and following him. And he said, see, just throw, the lesson was you can treat your people like this as long as you give them a little something that makes them happy. And this is kind of a really quick version of that.
I had not heard that Stalin story.
I don't know if it's true. So fact checkers, you can fact check us all day. It's a good analogy anyways, and he's the perfect person to put at the head of it.
Yep. Yeah. It's one of those things where it very well could be, because he's a psycho. We do have this brief kind of interlude, this short chapter in between what's going on with the girls, about going back to Rand and them not being able to find him, and Ingtar's kind of losing patience again. He's desperate to find it, so he's just going to quarter the ground until they pick up the scent with her. And
remind me again why Rand disappears. I didn't reread it because we weren't planning on doing real time today.
Well, no, the last we saw him was when they went through the portal stone. And so once they get to Toman Head, and all this time has passed, and then we don't see them for several chapters.
Oh, okay. So he doesn't disappear from the group. That's what I got from what you were saying.
No.
Okay, so he's with the group, and they're looking for the scent of the dagger and the horn.
And that they're arguing about how to get there, because Rand is sure he's here. But Ingtar is obsessed with picking the scent back up with her and finding the scent. And so Rand just wants to go straight to Falm, and they're arguing because Ingtar wants to find the scent.
Okay. That makes more sense. Yeah, I'm trying to catch up as we're going. Was there any? I see Doman's still there with Min. Okay, I remember what happened there. We'll get to that. What chapter are you on?
Disagreements, chapter 41.
I got too far ahead. Okay, so Rand has another dream here.
Yep.
Okay. So you finish your thought and then we'll go into the dream.
Nope, that was it. I was just trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to mention here, but I think the main, well, there is Varen is I don't know if it's curious to think how much does Varen know, because she's kind of counseling caution and she's trying to get Rand to not rush in, not be rash, and basically that the pattern will put him where he needs to be when he needs to be there. And that is kind of actually how things play out, because when he does finally actually go into Falm, all of these pieces have come, all of these different threads have come together to make it to where
that's why I put this book up.
To make it where he's getting there as the girls are making their escape, and these other things, so that the timing is right, and the white cloaks are the other thread there, because the white cloaks are coming in and they're making an assault on Falm, which is also helps them in their getaway.
Which I don't think we need to overthink Varen at this point.
Yeah.
Because she's also being tugged along by his Tavarin string. And so if the pattern's weaving around him, but the pattern also needs all those other things to do it, she's a useful thread to hold him back till the right time. And so if there is this fate determined by the pattern, the other threads are what keep the main thread in line.
And it's also interesting to see her interact with Rand, because she seems to know much better than Moiraine how to guide him. Probably because she is actually guiding him, not trying to lead him the way Moiraine does. And we you know, little bit of tease, won't say much more, but we do see it again with one of the other Taverns later, and she's doing the same thing. She kind of has the same style of guiding, a little bit of prodding, but she's not nearly as heavy-handed as Moiraine is.
Well, and you can look at their upbringing too, though. Moiraine was a noble woman. She's well versed in the game of houses, and we saw how that worked out with Rand. The game of houses, everything, every manipulation, you can just feel it on your skin, basically. And a country bumpkin, stubborn boy is going to reject that, just like an allergy almost. And Varen has a little bit more humble upbringing, and she understands how well, I guess we don't want to tease too much, but she understands how to do things without the power a little bit better.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it as well.
Oh yeah, if I was thrown into a place like Karheim, it would be like allergies the whole time. It would feel like something itchy on my skin.
Did you have thoughts on the dream?
Uh, well, I mean, just hammering home the point that he thought the Dark One was dead, but now we've got two instances in this book where he's like, oh shit, he's very much alive, and he's still in my dreams, which is important because there's very little you can do to keep him out of your head, and that was pretty much it, except, well, he's also, you could tell that the Dark One in his dreams is still trying to keep him alive and manipulate him versus just kill him. Because as we learn later of how this works, as powerful as that the person that's visiting him in his dreams is, he could have killed him at any time.
And he demonstrates that he has demonstrated that a couple of times
Mhm.
already. I mean, just with the rats way
Mhm.
back in Eye of the World, that he can kill things in the dream and they're dead
Mhm.
in the waking world.
Rand still stubbornly holding on because he keeps calling him Loose Theron. And Rand is like, no, I'm Rand. I'm Rand al'Thor. Which is important because that becomes a bigger battle as the books go on. Am I Rand al'Thor? Am I Loose Theron? Who am I? What am I? And the complete mindfuck knowing you're someone else because they have this reincarnation thing.
That struggle to hold on to his identity in the face of this, not just, you know, the prophecies, the reincarnation, but the expectation of what he's supposed to be, who he's supposed to be now. And he's still trying to hold on to as much of himself as he can. So we cut back to Falm and the girls.
There's a little plot hole here too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, right in the first sentence of this chapter, because the sensing other people, ability to channel. Well, Nyneave and Elaine would shine like beacons in this town, and in the scene right as you open up there, they're being passed by leashed domain.
Well, they won't shine unless they're holding the power.
I thought you could still just sense the presence of the power.
You can sense if you're close enough, but he's never really clear on how.
Oh no, he
exactly
did. He fixed
works.
it right there. They dared not come too close. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Because remember,
so disregard all after hello on that thought.
When Moiraine does it, Nyneave is really close to her. Like, you know, she has snuck up within a few steps to be able to easily hear them talking. So interesting thing to me in these next couple of chapters, is how Nyneave has taken charge, and she's still kind of a stubborn bully, but she's actually pretty good at it. And her traveling companion is the princess of the country she's ostensibly from. And yet, even though, and we'll see this later, Elaine is actually very knowledgeable when it comes to politics and governing. And she actually is very capable and good at that. She's not particularly wise. She has some huge gaps in her education that actually, what's going on here is the start of her filling in those gaps to make her an even better leader. But Nyneave is definitely a strong character with a natural leader quality to her. And well, what we talked about and ranted about in her first POV scene is this is what makes a strong character. This is what makes a
Mhm.
strong person, is she was terrified, but she wasn't going to let that fear decide what she did. And, we see that here when they get to, at the end of these two chapters where they get to, they meet up with Min and she takes them to Baal Doman. And she, pulls her freaking ring out and everybody else is freaked out and she refuses to show any fear or apprehension about it.
Mhm.
It says she takes her time to put it away.
Yeah, there's a lot of just setup in this chapter for
Mm.
a lot of the stuff we do with the domain, the soul dam and the domain as we
Mhm.
go forward, because there's a lack of understanding there. Elaine using the power to steal the apples, and she's one of her justifications is, well, if I was a prisoner, I wouldn't help my captors, but they don't know that that soul dam knows everything that prisoner knows.
Mhm.
They don't have the depth of knowledge here, and I think it's hard to go into that without spoilers, I think. So I'm
Mhm.
gonna kind of hold back.
Well, it's not a big spoiler because we're about to get to it here in the end, with some of that at least. When Eqwene makes good her escape. I know that's a big one, but you may be thinking some other things too. My only other thought on these two chapters before we get to the uh the end here, basically, uh uh we get a good feel for all four of these personalities because we come back to Min and her, um her attempts at lightheartedness. She has a strong empathetic streak which matches with her ability, her power
Mhm.
to see these visions. um and so it's always nice when we get a POV from her because you see how that empathy conflicts with some of the really terrible things she has to see.
Mhm.
um because even if she doesn't see the ultimate end, she knows for a certainty that this bad thing is going to happen to this person.
Mhm.
um and then we get, like I talked about, Nyneave, and Elaine is slowly starting to understand, slowly starting to become less girlish. That a lot of her faults right now are simply that she's very much um a young woman who's still acting like a girl in a lot of ways because of those kind of gaps in her understanding of the world that I mentioned.
Mhm.
And then of course um Egwene's understanding of what's happening to her, and her desperation to hold on to who she is. Um, and a lot of that, like you said, is stuff that's going to come up in later books. I mean,
Mhm.
remember this scene, and she's going to reference it a number of times, but remember this psychological conditioning and her uh, attempts and ability to withstand it. And it makes what a lot of what happens later make complete sense.
Mhm. Now going forward, when we start in chapter 44, this is where Jordan starts doing something he tends to do at the end of his, at the climax of all the books going forward,
Mhm.
is it kind of bounces around a lot. So it's like a short bit with
Yeah,
Perrin, and then we get the White Cloaks again, and then a short bit with Rand, and then
because he's brought all these threads here.
yeah. So now we've got multiple things coming together, and he kind of shows this point of view back to back. So how do you want to tackle that from an analytical stance? Do we want to cover one thread at a time, or do we want to bounce back and forth as well? Do we
Oh,
want
we
to
can
go book chronologically, or do we want to do?
let's just go chronologically. Because I think we can move pretty fast through here. So I do think it's interesting that well, actually, had they mentioned the White Cloaks? I don't think they ever did. So somehow they got surprised by the White Cloaks. I don't think they ever figured out that there were White Cloaks on Toman Head until Bornhold shows up here.
Yeah, that's well. There was a scene earlier where he ordered the march, but
Yeah. And it's a small thing, but it's gonna be such a problem later because Buyer is a psycho of Bornhold thinking, going through trying to get his people ready for the last move to Falm to engage the Seanchan. And in this back of his mind, he's trying to, what was that guy's name? What was that guy's name? Oh, Perrin. What? And that's going to stick in Buyer's craw because he's a nut. So again, another small little thread that's going to keep going past this book and into a couple books down, actually.
Yeah, because he sends Buyer off to watch from a distance and report everything, even though Buyer, by personality trait, is the one who wants to be on the front line.
Yep.
Just killing Dark Friends. All he wants to do is kill Dark Friends.
Then back to Rand, and I think it's
the
a pretty
previous scene with Perrin. They had found the scent.
Yes,
of Thane.
They picked up the scent.
That's why I was asking if we're going to go chronologically, and then you skip to the White Cloaks.
Well,
but separating it was fine. Yeah, separating because if you had said let's do the threads, then I would have said start with the White Cloaks. So,
oh, and you know what? Have we? Far above their heads, a huge wing shape circled unnoticed.
Oh, yeah.
Have we seen those before yet? I feel like they were referenced, but I don't know that anyone has seen.
I think this is the first reference to them, except for maybe Doman walking through and maybe seeing them in a stable with the Grom or whatever. But
so just a little tease, and of course, letting the reader know, something's up here. Same with what happens next, which is Rand practicing his forms, and Heron waiting in the rushes, Ingtar said. He sat with his back against a tree, sliding a sharpening stone across the sword and watching Rand. You should not be bothering with that one. It leaves you completely open. Lance says it's good for developing balance. What you practice too often, you use without thinking. You will put your sword in the other man with that if you're quick, but not before he has his through your ribs. You are practically inviting him. I don't think I could see a man face me so open and not put my sword in him, even knowing he might strike home at me if I did. And unless, you read incredibly slowly and it's been months since you read the beginning of this book, I think you know what's coming.
Yeah.
Right. Because this was teased back in the beginning, and Rand made a big deal about it in his POV about warders are crazy, right? Is why would you do that? What kind of nonsense are you talking about? And then he's about to.
Well, he used a certain term, sheathing the sword. So.
And he's about to understand it completely, because he's going to be in a situation where he sees no other way out.
Which is actually, we talked about the progression of the characters. When we see where he has to use it, he's not there yet, skill wise or maturity wise. So it's you do what you have to do, not that it will come to you when you need it. There's a difference between those two things.
Well, I heard I heard an SF guy say once, um, luck is when opportunity meets prep, or when preparation meets opportunity.
Mhm.
So that there's your difference between, it'll just happen. No, it all of that, that you did over there now pays off here.
Mhm.
You know, um,
See, I would say that a different way because of the, I don't know, the ideology behind what I do is if you prepare properly and things still don't work out, that's bad luck. But you can't differentiate between the two unless you do the preparation.
that's a good point. So let's see. Yeah, so White Cloaks here. So yeah, they had not heard yet. They had not seen any sign or heard that there were White Cloaks about, because Ingtar is just completely shocked and confused. And now we have Varen manipulating again, and she kind of mutters about five shall ride forth. And we know what that is because we saw that way back in the Watchers chapter when Adelaus or Vandine, whichever one, was talking to Moiraine, and she mentioned that one, I believe, is where we first heard the five shall ride forth, four shall come back.
Yeah, I'm looking for it right now.
Yes, because the full thing is five shall ride forth, four shall come back, above the Watchers, something. So that was back in there, and so we know what's going on here, and are left to wonder. All right, well, who's the red shirt? Who's the unlucky guy that's not coming back here?
Yeah, here we go. There's a verse in the original that translates literally as 5 ride forth and 4 return. Above the Watchers shall he proclaim himself, bannered across the sky in fire.
Yep. So we the reader know that something big is about to happen here. We also know that Varen is kind of manipulating things here. She absolutely has a logic to it of, loyal, you can't go, you'll stand out. Uno, you and your people look like what you are, which is soldiers, and too many will draw too many eyes. 5's a good number, and everyone there has a purpose. So she has an absolute logic to what she's doing, but she's clearly being guided by, or trying to purposely complete prophecy in her idea of.
And being a Brown, she would probably know the same things that Adelaus and Vandine knew.
More so even because she makes a point a couple of times that her studies have been deep into the more esoteric when it comes to these kinds of things, the shadow and the dragon and those kinds of things. As much as she's curious about other things, she's really delved deeply into this stuff particularly.
With this little bit here, it's probably not, it's secondary, but Rand says, I'll go, to help Matt get the dagger and Ingtar find the horn, and everybody's basically saying, I'll go and I'll go and I'll go. It's like the Lord of the Rings with, and you my axe and you have my bow and everything, and we have a meme for that. So hold on, let me bring it up.
Bye. Good luck. Okay, and then like you say, we're gonna bounce around here. So the next chapter starts with the girls, and they're executing their plan of capturing uh, a Domine and a Soldam to take their dresses. I thought you were talking about the Ukraine one.
No.
I hadn't seen that one. Matt Cawthon is locked out. God, I hate you people. Okay. And this is where you find out that the collar works on the Soldam. It's not supposed to, but it does. We find out in a little bit why that works, because Eqwene has been the one to puzzle this out.
Mm-hmm. Wait, where are we at? Because
The beginning of chapter 45, page 621. So this
okay.
is
By the title of the chapter, I was like, we're still in Rand. No,
exactly.
okay.
That was
Yeah,
why
yeah.
I had to take a second looking at it, going, oh yeah, because we're going to get to the Blade Master here in a second. But and then I love the occasional short little couple of paragraphs bounce back to Bail Doman sitting on his ship, not wanting to leave the girls. You know, he kind of has a personality a lot like Matt, really, of, you know, outwardly kind of a blustering a-hole, but then in the end, you know, any any man goes for one of those lines before I say so, and I'll throw him overboard, you know.
Yeah, and it's that's I think the misunderstanding of Matt, because and how they horribly portrayed him in the show. Because to me, he's like a Doc Holliday. He is a not a traditional hero, but at the same time, he's got his own code of honor, and he has and it is actual honor, not just like a Dexter code of honor. He's altruistic in his own way, instead of just altruistic in the traditional way.
So now we get to Rand, and yeah, and now we because from Rand's point of view, they see the Grom and he knows what those are, and it's what the heck. Ingtar gets a moment to be awesome, where he hops the wall, says count to 100 and follow me, and then they do, and he's barehanded taking out this guard with no noise. So we get to see him being awesome here. And then we get a little more of the Seanchan weirdness, where they encounter the servants with first of all, the servants with see-through clothes, but then they don't do anything. They just, whoop, I saw nothing. I saw nothing. And you have to think that's because they're used to, especially the ones from Seanchan, they're used to the blood going after each other. And I'm not going to get involved because those people are demigods, and I'm a lowly worm. This has nothing to do with me. Turn and walk away.
It's kind of a weird dynamic where if I say something, I can save my master. But if the new masters win, then I'm dead. But if I, and so it's like the only thing to do is just not do nothing, not do anything, and to have this whole caste system, which is just I do my job and that's it. Whoever takes it, and so that saves you if the other ones win. And so they have this code that they've developed to basically they can have these blood wars, and everybody else is just kind of not getting in the way, but also not getting hurt by it. So.
Two interesting things that happen here as we get to the end. The way Ingtar is desperate for the horn, and yet Matt is being Matt, and he's like, he just snatches them up kind of quickly, instinctively. Okay, got it, let's go. You know, like he's pilfering a pie. And then we get Turak and the Seanchan arrogance turned up to 11 as the guy just steps in to grab the horn because I would hate to have it accidentally damaged. And I don't think we've seen the dagger do anything yet, have we?
No.
And now we see the physical toll the corruption of Shadar Logoth can have. In the way it just kills this guy with pure corruptive evil, in a pretty terrible way.
Mm-hmm. And then take that thought and apply it to that's what's happening at a slow level, just being near it,
mm-hmm.
and in being in possession of it. Do we get to the other cool Ingtar scene yet?
Well, we almost. Here's another cool Ingtar scene of, everybody's staring at this horrible thing that just happened, and you see Ingtar said softly, "We are no easy meat." Suddenly, he leaped over the corpse toward the soldiers, still goggling at what was left of the man who had stood at their shoulders only moments before. "Shanoa!" he cried, "follow me!" And he throws himself into this big group of soldiers that has them outnumbered. And then that's when Rand has to face off against an actual blade master.
Mm-hmm. And this is why I really liked Turak's character, and I keep having to re-point out that he's an indifferent. He's not a good guy. He's not a bad guy. Mm-hmm. But yet he has to face off against the ultimate hero of the whole series. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like this is bad luck. This is bad luck because I'm not an evil person. I just happen to be in this part of fate. And he plays his role, and I actually thought him a very interesting character, even though you see him for maybe 10 pages of the whole book.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. He gives you a lot of insight very quickly into the Seanchan in general, the blood in particular. Mm-hmm. And then I like the way the scene plays out, especially from Rand's point of view, where he starts off just, basically like his sparring session at the beginning of the book with Lan is he's just kind of fending off attacks. He's just trying to survive because he doesn't want to embrace the void because Sidon is there and it scares the crap out of him, and rightfully so. But we already know from the girls that embracing the power enhances your senses. Mm-hmm. So it's more than just the trick of the flame and the void. That already gives Rand a leg up on most other people being able to empty himself emotionally in that way. But then you add on, taking hold of the power when you do that, and now you get another step up on normal people because your senses are heightened. And we see that when he finally does it. Finally he knows he has no other choice, or this guy's going to kill him. He embraces the void, the power floods into him, and all of a sudden he's on the offensive. Mm-hmm. And from the point where he goes on the offensive, he is actually pretty quick. Mm-hmm. And he does have the thought here of sheathe the sword, but that won't help Eqwene. He needs to go help Eqwene. So he actually has the thought here that he might have to do that, but he's just seen Eqwene out the window, and so he can't let himself do that.
You know what this fight reminds me of? The Princess Bride. Where
I'm not left-handed.
Turak's just toying with him, and then he's just like, okay, I'm not left-handed, and he starts to actually go at him, and then Rand embraces the void, and he's like, I'm not left-handed either. And
and then we have a never before had he confronted a human being with a sword except in practice or bluff. And so he has a moment here where he's shaken because he just killed a man. Cut him in half, basically. And it shakes him. Because he's still a decent person from a simple background. Now, again, then part of the threads all coming together, he wants to run out and save Eqwene, but he's getting literally pushed out the door because something is happening outside now. And it has nothing to do with what just happened in here. It's, we know, it's, well, there are over 1,000 heavy cavalry advancing towards us. So the Seanchan are trying to get ready, are being stirred up because of that. But fate, the pattern, is pushing Rand out the door through, Ingtar and Perrin literally pushing him out the door because he needs to be somewhere else right now for everything to play out.
We get another moment with the servants too. After he kills Turak, they basically just kneel down and kill themselves.
Well, some of them do. The ones that were closest to him, and I can't remember, because I think some of them they still run by that are still laying on the ground, in the kind of kowtow position. But the ones closest to Turak do that, and it's weird and creepy. And we will actually learn more about that later, about the different degrees of servants. Like, your terminology was perfect. It's a caste system that makes India's classical caste system look simple. Especially when you start to get into the blood and their inner workings, because not only is there then a hierarchy amongst the blood, but then there's a hierarchy amongst their servants. Okay, so then we jump back to the girls, and we have kind of another meta instance here, because Jordan doesn't want the girls to make it to the boat because he needs all of his main characters here, both for the epilogue of this book and then for the setup of the next book. But it's not contrived in any way. The White Cloaks are coming, the Seanchan are going crazy, but there's an information gap. It's one of the driving components of action throughout the whole series is lack of information. And we see right away what we were talking about earlier with Eqwene, that she's very brittle right now because of what has happened to her. And Nyneave is, she's the one that's going to, even though she's the one with the temper, keep calm. This has nothing to do with us. We just need to keep moving and get out of here. And Eqwene is the one who snaps that I will not be collared again. And I was just thinking too that I hadn't really had this thought before, but the title of the first chapter of this arc here with the girls was called Practice. And they're in the tower, and they're practicing simple weaves, basically, right? And now we see after a while being trained as a Domine, we already knew Eqwene was very powerful in just raw power terms. And now we see just how powerful she's becoming. And she's not even at her full potential yet. But she takes this big chunk of Seanchan soldiers, and she just obliterates them and routes the ones she doesn't kill.
Remember, part of the theme, this isn't she just brought it when it needed it and accepted forming a circle and blowing up a Trolloc army. This is I actually was trained for this. I just got a fast track, painful
Yes.
kind of introduction to it all.
Right. Right.
You can make somebody good fast. It just sucks.
She's been in the Soviet gym with Drago getting juiced up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can make someone good fast. It sucks and it has byproducts. That's the problem. It's not always the best way. But she went through it and she survived, so therefore she's become more badass as the result.
Yeah. And we already knew that Nyneave was a quick learner. They've established that. And when they make their escape after Leandrin tries to hand them off, it mentions that some of what she did is because she saw Domine do it, and then she just replicated it. And that's how she was able to throw fire and lightning all over the place. And then she already has the raw power. But now we see it with Eqwene, and that's going to be something that's going to build and build later. So, again, it's not contrived. This all makes sense. What's going on here, and for all of Nyneave losing her temper about Eqwene losing her cool, it makes perfect sense for Eqwene, given what she just came out of. And in fact, she even kind of says that, and that's going to be something that pops up again later, is Eqwene, a little bit of a rift between the three now, because they can't understand what she went through. And so now to a certain extent, she's kind of a little bit separate and alone because of this trauma that she's gone through that the other two didn't have to experience. And then we pop back to Dolman real quick so we can see him seeing the lightning blasting all around, and but he's refusing to leave. Poor Bornhold. As he starts to see this, and so he's moving tells Bayer to go where he can see, and then starts to move his men forward, knowing that this probably isn't going to end well. And now again, the pattern pushing all these threads together, and Rand had to get out. He had to literally be pushed out. He couldn't go save Eqwene because he needed to be here, stuck between this rock and a hard place, hiding in this little copse of trees, looking at white cloaks over here starting to advance, and on the other side, Seanchan pouring out a foam, starting to form up into battle ranks, and now we're kind of screwed. Oh wait, no, we're not there yet.
Yeah, not yet. Not yet. No, we still need Ingtar to be badass again.
Oh yeah, poor Ingtar. This works because Jordan has taken the time to set it up. And we know who Ingtar is. We've been with him all along the way. We know he's kind of rough around the edges, that he's a little too obsessed with the horn. But then to find out he is not only a dark friend, but he's the one that
let the Trollocs into Faldara and
let the gray man in, that as he says, I still don't know if he was shooting at you or the Emerald. And now he's going to, the other reason this works is because this scene is subdued. It's a great death scene because it's a quiet death scene for a heroic character. That, yes, we're about to have, the shouting and the clash of steel down the alley as Rand and Huron run away. But Ingtar is very calm. As he once again points out that Moraine made the right choice. You're the real leader here because all you care about is saving your friends.
Mhm.
All I cared about was glory and my own personal redemption.
Mhm.
That's why I can't have the horn. That's why it has to be you. And that's why I need to make my stand here, and I need to try and gain my redemption in this way, in sacrificing myself so someone else can run off and get the glory that I wanted for myself. Yeah.
Well, and this brings the portal stones back into it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because part of his, he was already on the path to redemption, but part of his awakening to some extent is seeing himself in these other lives, and it kind of solidified his decision.
Yeah. Because doesn't it even say that there were times where I even held it in my hands and I couldn't sound it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So, um,
But then he holds the gap,
yep.
not in the way he thought he would in his real life, in his regular life, but
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I think it's in a couple pages. It's one of the best rise, fall, redemption stories
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
there is. So that's why I always loved Ingtar as a side character. So these last couple chapters have some of my favorite bit part characters that stood out even from a young age.
Mhm. And we get the sheathing sheathing the sword again here to really drive it home. It is every man's right, Rand, to choose when to sheathe the sword, even one like me.
Mhm.
And then it the way the scene ends even is is great because Ingtar tells him to just go take the horn to the Emerald, and then Rand gives him the funeral rites basically
Mhm.
of the Shinarans. Um, and Huron gasps because he knows what that means.
Mhm.
Um, and then Rand, runs off, drags him off down the alley.
Mhm.
You know, but Lord Ingtar does what he has to do. Rand says sharply, but we go.
Well, and again, we get another step in leadership with Rand. He's leaving a guy to his death for the
Mhm,
greater good. And so he just killed a man for the first time.
mhm,
Now
mhm.
he's basically not using a man because he's doing it on his own free will, but he's doing it on his own free
He's
will
kill he
for Rand,
he's killing a man, but in a different way.
but in a different way. Yeah.
I had not thought of that either. That this is kind of a double whammy from that perspective, but yet because of how it happens, it's an initial shock to him
Mhm.
where Rand doesn't even want to believe what he's hearing. That he knows what Ingtar's saying there at the beginning of that scene, but he tells him, "You're not making sense, man," because at a certain level, it doesn't make any sense to Rand. He trusted Ingtar, he befriended Ingtar. He just can't believe what he's hearing, that Ingtar's telling him that I'm a dark friend.
Mhm.
Um, and then we get to
The
the
scene you almost
last
jumped to. Yeah.
the scene I almost jumped to. Yeah, now we get to the um uh I just we're still on Ingtar here though in the first couple of paragraphs of chapter 47.
Mhm.
Where's Ingtar? Matt shouted. What's going on? Um He's dying, Rand said harshly as he swung into Red's back. Then we have to go back to help him, Parent said. Matt can take the horn and the dagger too. He is doing it so we can all get away, Rand said for that too. We we will all take the horn to Varen, and then you can help her, blah, 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 blah. So, and now you hear Ingtar shouting in the clash of metal back behind them. Um, and Rand just spurs his horse to a dead run because, you know, as he's thinking, as he's speeding away because he wants to get away from what's happening, is Ingtar, dark friend, I don't care. He was still my friend. And then he thinks the saying that's actually a taken from a slight modification of a Japanese saying, death is lighter than a feather, duty are heavier than a mountain. And that is going to be another recurring theme throughout the series.
Mhm.
I love the end of this little scene here before we jump back to Bornhold, because it's very Matt.
Mhm.
It makes sense that Matt's the one that's going to sound the horn here, because it has to be at the last battle. Matt said, licking his lip, nothing says it can't be used before then. That's good quality Matt logic.
Mhm.
And then he sounds the horn. I love that it's got a mystical, magical quality to it. The way it sounds out and is, this one long, beautiful note that can be heard everywhere. The ground starts, the Dominates start throwing the ground up in front of them. Bornhold charges. It's two great scenes here, because obviously Ingtar is the main one, but then we get a good ending for Bornhold. Even his last thought was regret. Bayer would not be able to tell his son Dane how he had died because of the fog that's coming up
Mhm.
from from the sounding of the horn.
Now, this is the irony that I talked about alluded to earlier. So the Seanchan consider themselves the descendants of Arthur Hawkwing coming back to reclaim their own land.
Mhm.
And the biggest setback in their return is Arthur Hawkwing.
Who leads the heroes of the horn. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
And we get introduced to a lot of people here.
yep.
A lot of the heroes.
So some names that we've actually heard before kind of teased
Mhm.
when they were mentioned around Tom and his storytelling.
Mhm.
People wanting the stories of these heroes, stories of the hunters of the horn.
Mhm.
I'm pretty sure we've heard Geidel Kane mentioned before.
Mhm.
Yergeet, which is a modification of a Welsh or Celtic deity or demigod mythical figure, which is cool. That's a lot of these names come from things like that, which is cool if you want to get nerdy and dig into that.
Mhm. We need to save that. We need to save that one for when when we actually get to that character. But
You're no, but it's a great tease, because Geidel Kane, who's this short, stocky, ugly guy, but
Mhm.
a bad mamma jamma,
And there that still never got
fully resolved. No.
fully resolved of whether the theories on that were true
Mm-hmm.
and the
No,
way time and space work. Yeah.
I think that was a one he left purposefully open like that. Uh, at the bottom of page 661, though, we get Hawkwing the philosopher here, and why you have that book up over your left shoulder.
Mhm.
The pattern weaves itself around our necks like halters, Arthur Hawkwing said. You are here, the banner is here, the weave of this moment is set. We have come to the horn, but we must follow the banner and the dragon. Huron made a faint sound as if his throat had seized. Burn me, Matt breathed. It's true. Burn me. And then this, as I said way back when we were first talking about the Great Hunt, I love it when all three are together, because they are such differently dynamic personalities. So you have Rand kind of just stubbornly, finally admitting it. And Matt being Matt of, And then Perrin just gets down from his horse and says, "Give me the banner." And this needs to be done. I'll do it. And so he goes, chops up a sapling, makes a half for the banner, and he's going to be the bannerman as they charge on down.
Mm-hmm. And I like this moment with Huron too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the implication that heroes can be made as well.
Sometimes the wheel adds to our number, friend. Perhaps you will find yourself among us one day. Yeah. And then they charge on down into weirdness. Well, first, when they first come down, Birgit makes the comment, "We have all the time we need." And then as they finally move out to charge down into the Seanchan, Rand sees that pretty much no time has passed. So time is very weird here. And the horn is doing something with time. And
again, I'm gonna here. Let me close my door real quick. You keep talking.
I do find it curious what happens to Rand, where so the fog surrounds them, they're pulled up. It makes me think that maybe what's happening here is that the horn is kind of pulling the world of dreams into the real world.
Focal point, just like the Green Man.
Yes, and kind of merging the two, because of how the fight with Balsamon happens here. And it is very similar to some of the things we've seen in the world of dreams, where there's this weird kind of mystical fog, and this you can't see what's around you. You just have a sense that there's other stuff around you, that kind of thing.
Well, not only that, Hawkwing and his heroes seem to know how to navigate it, whereas nobody else does.
Yes. And the way that now it's going to be emblazed literally across the sky. So it was above the Watchers, and Van Dien was assuming, okay, that means he's going to reveal himself in this territory that's north of Tolman Head. No, literally in the sky above. And so for that to be happening, I think that's an additional clue that there's this merging of the world of dreams and the real world, the waking world right now, so that everybody can see this. And so I like how he's aware of other things. So he's fighting his fight, but he also can kind of see and know what's going on here, which again, more kind of proof to me that that's what's going on here, because we've seen some of the weird visions, and we're going to see more later in the next book. We're going to see more of these kind of weird visions that can happen in the world of dreams. And then when he goes to actually fight Balsamon sword versus his staff, the ebb and flow of that fight mimics the ebb and flow of the fight on the ground.
And the incarnation of the Dark One here does still try to tempt him to turn. But as far as the combat part, I would like to interject here too. This is one of the weaknesses of Rand's training. He trained sword on sword with Land, and that training ultimately, plus the Void, helped him defeat Turak. Now he's fighting sword on staff, and this is actually a hole in his training. It's a different if it's a different character, it's a different thing. He knows what to expect. He knows what the counters are to what comes at you with a sword.
Little bit of a tease to one of our favorite scenes that's going to happen in the next book. I shall say no more.
Yes.
that it is, and it's also that he he doesn't have that same internal resolve that he did fighting Turak.
Mhm.
So he's,
Well, you got to think at this point he's kind of worn out too.
yeah, but okay, so 664 is when the actual fight starts. They're talking at each other, and even floating in emptiness, Rand felt a chill. Would they have lied? I don't want to be the dragon reborn. So he's thinking about this, and he's still conflicted about this. Is that, he's finally seeing it. It's not the White Tower using me as a false dragon. I'm actually the dragon. And as we've talked about, that's Jordan turning that chosen one on its head. He doesn't want to be. The chosen one is a terrible character, like a frightful character. But then we get this little interesting wrinkle here. You pitiful wretch, you have sounded the horn of Valir. You are linked to it now. Do you think the worms of the White Tower will ever release you now? And so we get it kind of steals Rand's resolve in a way, because, oh, wait a minute. I have, second to underestimating an opponent, probably the next worst thing you can do is overestimate an opponent. And Rand has been overestimating Balsamon because he kind of thinks that the Dark One is all powerful. And clearly, Balsamon doesn't know everything. And that's an interesting wrinkle.
Which is a little bit of a teaser to what's the future with this, because we do learn something about this incarnation in the next book.
We also get a little bit of something that's going to become an issue for a couple of books, as you kill yourself while we stand here. The power rages in you. It burns you. It is killing you. I alone in all the world can teach you how to control it. Serve me and live. Serve me or die. And then Rand rushes at him full of emotion, and this time it was he who was driven back. And that's kind of the ebb and flow of their battle, is when he lets that emotion control him, lets that emotion drive him rather than, just being a part of him. That's when he begins to lose the battle. That's when he gives, Balsamon an edge over him.
Where do we see that again? Let the hate flow through you.
Yeah.
Oh God, I got another meme for that. Hold on.
Oh, okay.
You talk. I got this one.
Well, so the bottom of page 665, you'd mentioned the portal stones kind of were kind of the last bit of Ingtar's resolve for redemption, and it was what he saw through there. And Rand kind of has that same moment here. Oh, I hate that on multiple levels.
Oh,
because he is kind of being whiny like in the prequels, but I digress. I have one again loose there, and the thought was beyond the void, yet it took an effort to ignore it, not to think of all the lives where he had heard it. So what he saw through the portal stones is kind of strengthening his resolve here at the end. And then the thoughts come through his mind about what he hears Land's voice, then he hears Ingtar's voice about sheathing the sword, and then death is lighter than a feather, duty heavier than a mountain. And so here has come his time to sheathe the sword, and he opens himself up for that attack. That's going to have resounding consequences through through the books with this terrible wound from this creepy staff of Balsamon.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the epilogue here of so we've had the climactic battle, and now all of a sudden we've got poor little Min who's been separated from the other girls and finds Rand just lying on the ground behind a house in Falm.
Well, not only does it
drags
have
him in.
other implications down the road, but it's a little bit Jordan-esque here to have the one person that can't do anything to heal him is the one that finds him. And she has to find a very human way to make him, you know, as comfortable as possible.
And then since we're from her point of view, we get a little bit of the viewing that she's hinted at, that she saw about Rand, that this link between her and Rand. And then the kind of a little bit of a conflict with Eqwene as she comes in, and you know, you cast him aside for the tower, so you have no claim on him. Because we had that scene in the with all three of the girls in the tower earlier, with Min talking about them, and you know, Elaine and Eqwene talking about Rand. And so Eqwene goes off to find Nyneave so she can try and heal him. And then we have Selene show up again. So
and no more need to worry about spoilers now.
A great reveal. I am called Lanfear Girl.
If there was any doubt.
Oh crap.
Yeah.
Yes. If there was any doubt, which there shouldn't have been from the Watchers chapter. Because I think that was the big, you know, kind of bat signal that Jordan was lighting to say, this is who this is, you know, for any of y'all who haven't figured it out yet. Luce Theron was and is mine, girl. Tend him well for me until I come for him. And then we have Buyer, gaunt face set with grim purpose, riding off to give his report about how dark friends like that Perrin of the Two Rivers had betrayed them and killed Bornhold. And then Rand wakes up to find Moiraine, who has been gone through the whole last half of this book. And I that has always been something of a curiosity to me, and I don't know if it's ever been answered, of what in the world took Moiraine so long to get here? What else was she doing? Because surely it wasn't just the treasure. Yeah, but then she takes off, and surely it didn't take her this long to get here. So what was she doing in between the end of that chapter when she leaves Vandine and Adelaus and here where she suddenly shows up in Fall?
Where was their hut?
That's a good question. I believe it was on the east side of the Mountains of Mist. So they would have had to cross the mountains to get to Falm.
Or go up and over.
Yeah. Or go up and over, yeah.
So, I mean, you got months of travel time just because the mountains are there. So.
Could be.
Well, and she also had to find out where they were. Because remember, she might have gone to Eridoman because of what Vandine said.
Yeah, and we're back to
which would put her position to hear of the events and then shoot straight down and meet up with the group.
Yeah, and we're back to how we spent a whole episode on that one chapter of what in the world was it that jogged Moiraine's memory there at the end of that chapter, which we kind of, you know, went in circles about of a couple of different ideas.
Yeah, no doubt she went looking for that. But again, with the advice she got, she would be just a little off, but be right in position to shoot down a couple days to find him.
And so we're already setting up the next book, because when he wakes up, Min tells him what had happened, that the girls had all been there. And they'd freed Eqwene, and then her and Matt and her and Varen and Nyneave had all left to go back to the tower already. Because he's been out of it for days. And now we have twice the Heron to name him true. So he's gotten the other brand in his palm now of the other Heron from when he drove the sword home. So he
Plus
has
a
been
nice little
named
hole in
true.
his side.
Plus a nice little hole in his side.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of a big deal because, as we know, healing with a capital H, there's not even a scar left. That's how healing works. It's an all or nothing, and it's like it never happened. You can't do any good with that. It isn't healed all the way yet. Varen tried healing, but she said it didn't work the way it should. She hesitated, nibbling her lip. Moiraine says Nyneave must have done something, or you wouldn't have lived till we carried you to Varen. But Nyneave says she was too frightened to light a candle. There is something wrong with your wound. You will have to wait for it to heal naturally. It makes me wonder, because if Varen didn't do it, did land fear do something to him to keep him from dying? Because she goes over.
She drew the dragon's fang on his forehead, and then he stirred, and it was the
Mhm.
first movement there. So yeah, possibly. She's the most likely suspect.
Yeah. So it makes me think that Lanfear did something to keep the wound from killing him. And again, more setting up of the conflict of between Rand and Moiraine. Moiraine is here. He barked a bitter laugh. When you said Varen was gone, I thought I was free of Aes Sedai again. I am here, Moiraine said. I wish you weren't here, he told the Aes Sedai. As far as I'm concerned, you can go back to wherever you've been hiding and stay there. I have not been hiding, Moiraine said calmly. I've been doing what I could here on Toman Head and in Falm. It was little enough, though I learned much. I failed to rescue two of my sisters before the Seanchan herded them onto their ships with the leashed ones, but I did what I could. So we do have some idea of what she was doing. I do wonder, though, if it was that kept her away from finding Rand, or if it was
Well, okay, there's an important moment here too. Because this is where we find out Varen lied. So I did not send Varen, but remember Varen said Moiraine sent me. So,
and that's what I was teasing with that chapter of the satisfied nod she gave herself, that did she somehow create some kind of internal logic that she was able to convince herself that was not a lie? Because in that case, she can say that in the same way that she could tell something, she could say something that was not true if that was what she knew, if she was, certain that, X equals Y, because she's certain that it does, even if it isn't. So now we get the and then of course with Liandrin, showing the Black Ajah exists for all the world to see. We now get into the cottage industry of trying to figure out who is a dark friend and who could be and who definitely isn't. And let's get out our Excel spreadsheets.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that wraps it up. Well, this book was interesting in the fact that it does seem like so little happens when you read through it. But then as we tried to do the deeper analysis and we thought we were going to get through it quickly, it was like, oh, but this is important for setup later. And this is important for setup later. And this is important for setup later. So it's one of those examples of sometimes you have to take a little bit of boring to set up the overall story.
Yeah. And you know, as we said, that's why that Ingtar scene is so great, is because we had all of these chapters, you know, these hundreds of pages setting him up, getting to this one defining moment here, just 2 or 3 pages, but it's a great, you know, rise and fall and redemption story just right there.
Mm-hmm. And now we go to the best book of them all, Dragon Reborn.
Yeah, it's a toss up for me of if for me it's the Dragon Reborn or the Shadow Rising, but those are definitely my two
I was
favorite.
just gonna say that it's so close that you can almost that little blip in time, 3 and 4 together is the best moment in the whole
Yeah.
story. So,
I have some concluding thoughts, just more general thoughts on the story. And all right, can I share this?
you should be able to.
Yeah. This is what I was talking about. And this is a great illustration of what I was talking about with
It didn't come up.
I'm about to bring it up.
Okay.
The subdued nature of that scene and why I don't trust modern storytellers for the most part to get something like this right. Okay, I might lose my nerd card here, but I think Blade Runner is one of the more overrated movies ever made. But it has some phenomenal scenes, which is why I think the movie is overrated, because it's way too long and ponderous, and yet there are some scenes in here that are just amazing. And especially when you consider that Rutger Hauer wrote this monologue. He didn't like the way the scene was written initially, and he worked with the director to write out his own monologue. And it's rightfully considered one of the greats.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. Attack ships on fire off the shoulder of Orion. I watched sea beams glitter in the dark near the 10-house gate. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
I don't trust modern storytellers to be able to. I mean, first, as we've been ranting about, one of the reasons that scene works is because you've had all of these building scenes with Rutger Hauer's character establishing that he wants to live. For anyone who doesn't know, the replicants in the Blade Runner story have a very finite lifespan, and they have like a 5 or 10 year lifespan, something like that. And he's desperately trying to find a way to extend that. Because all of those things he's seen, all of those experiences he's had are about to be gone. And there's the reason the scene works so well is, one, you've set it up, and two, it's not being overplayed. It is a very quiet and subdued scene. You know, the Ingtar scene isn't loud. There's no yelling, there's no over the top emotion, and that's why it works. And I don't trust modern storytellers to be able to do that. As we've kind of ranted about and talked about, you know, on and offline, we were not expecting good out of the first season of Wheel of Time, and it was even worse than we thought. And with what we've seen, I expect season 2 to be even worse, because they're not setting things up, because they can't do scenes like this, and because they seem unable to make Matt or any of the characters their characters.
Okay, so the spoiler alerts for books. So if you're just here for the book series, go ahead and stop the film right now. Because I'm going to go into the series, which has thoughts from book 3 definitely, and maybe book 4.
Yeah.
So the way they set it up, Rand is already where he is about a quarter of the way through book 3, where he's out on his own away from everybody. Matt's not with the group. So unless there's going to be a Shinaran group of guys that goes with Perrin after the Horn, there is no Great Hunt. So the only thing they've set up here is they all 3 do something separate and end up together at Falme. That's the only way it works. And that just, we could see how disastrous that would be.
And it makes me think that you're right in thinking they're going to smush 2 and 3 together, that they're going to merge the Great Hunt with the Dragon Reborn. And I don't know if that means that they could do that because of both of them end up with a fight against Balsamon. So I guess you could have that same dynamic, that same fight. So you could merge those 2. But they did set up the Seanchan, so they're going to do the Zoman head stuff to some degree, right? But my bigger concern was, especially in rereading the Dragon Reborn, and you get some of it here after Matt has been healed, and we've talked about it. The dynamic between the 3 main characters, the 3 Tavern, is Matt can't be Matt the way they've set him up. He's going to be a completely different character. Even setting aside the dagger, he's moody and brooding. He is not the jokester that he is in the books. He is not the lighthearted comic relief that is the counterpoint to, Perrin's quiet, thoughtful stoicism and Rand's, rigid, duty-bound self, right? Those are the 3 dynamics there. And, Matt definitely isn't that. Rand is okay, kind of. And Perrin certainly isn't that. As you said, they've taken him from what he is in the books, from all the things we've talked about in the books, and they've turned him into Lenny from Mice and Men. And he's just not going to be able to be who he is. And this was another rant I had. I didn't have a specific scene for this one, but the Expanse is something I wanted to talk about at some point, because I think it's really good and really interesting. But I think I want to wait until we maybe get done with Wheel of Time or something. But I also wanted to get the books and start reading the books after our discussion with Chuck on The Witcher, and I want to be able to play that part of being able to compare the books. But I will say, for anyone who hasn't watched it, I feel the series works in spite of the main character, not because of. Because even though he's the main character, he's the protagonist. It is very much an ensemble cast. And as far as screen time goes, he doesn't have much more than anyone else. And the reason that I say it works in spite of is because he's very much a modern character. He's like Matt's moody broodingness. The main character in The Expanse always seems on the verge of crying to me. He's so emotional, all the time. It seems like he's always about to have a breakdown. It's a kind of a different modern way of chewing the scenery is the terminology that people use. If you think of like De Niro or Pacino and some of their more over the top moments, kind of that's the classic way of chewing the scenery. And I think this is the more modern way of emoting so hard that that you're always on the verge of some deep emotional meaningful in quote air quotes breakdown, and it makes him a very one-dimensional and very annoying, especially when you contrast him with Thomas Jane, who kind of starts out seeming like the main character, and he's definitely a main part of the first couple of seasons of that storyline. And he is a much better actor and a much more he's an older actor and kind of more, classical in that sense. As
Thomas Jane is my favorite Punisher. That's for sure.
by far,
the series was good, but the Punisher with Thomas Jane was.
I'm very annoyed that it just missed being in the MCU. It came just a little bit ahead of Iron Man 1, and it did okay, but it didn't do good enough to keep it going. Like I think they were wanting to
it's get
that going like Spider-Man.
The MCU, they were trying to be kind of fantastical, and the Thomas Jane Punisher was very raw, as Punisher should be. And there were several other Punishers around that same time, and I just couldn't get into it. But yeah, he's just a part of it. It was his acting, but the other part was it was like I said, raw and not fantastical.
Yeah. The fight scene he has with Diesel as the giant Russian guy was very brutal and very direct.
Well, and so a character like Punisher is something you can't do in the direction they went with the MCU, where you end up having gods and Hulks, and even as much as they kind of buffed her up a little bit, what Black Widow almost didn't fit. She fit best when she took over for Fury, because that was kind of the only place a real human could be at that point. And Punisher had nothing special about him except he was badass, special forces trained, and he was driven. He was vengeful. The Expanse is a good example of the kind of a saying in the nerd verse: once you understand physics, you hate action movies. And having worked in zero-G and Mars gravity environments, specifically with the biomechanics and bone density, that show annoyed me from that perspective. Someone's bones are so brittle from living in Mars their whole life that they could barely walk on Earth, but yet can kick somebody in the face with their shin without it breaking. That kind of just didn't sit well with me. It had nothing to do with the character, which she was one of the weaker actresses anyways, but I'm just like, yeah, you're trying to make her badass, but you also are kind of addressing the brittle bone thing from zero-G, but yet she can still punch somebody in the face. When she did it in her suit, it made sense, but then she was still doing it outside in regular, just with her fist. And I'm like, no, every bone in that arm would have been broken.
They tried to have it both ways, where they would talk about these things and they would talk about and show some of the more science part of the sci-fi, but then they also wanted an action show. So they kind of forgot about that stuff when they wanted their action show. And that's how something can be, as we talked about with Chuck with The Witcher, is, we complained a lot, but that's because it was good. It really is a good show, but it could be great. And The Expanse is like that, where it does enough things right that it's still good. But then you have the problem with the main character. You have some of the ignoring of the science that you've established because you want something cool.
Did my video just get a lot better?
Yep. And then
okay, I'll have to remember that setting.
the Wheel of Time is kind of the inverse of that, the mirror image, the negative image of that, because way too much of the show are those problems. And so there's just not enough good. I mean, we pointed out where we legitimately thought, that was a good scene, that was well acted, that was surprising, but there just wasn't enough of it. And especially because so many of the problems were core problems, like completely changing completely changing Perrin and Matt and making them not the characters they are in the story.
Completely changing how Tavarin works. Or even my biggest complaint about the show is the lack of emphasis on how important it is to train for using the power. Train in general, but I'm going to specifically say for the power was the biggest one. You just had it. You can do it.
And there's a reason we tell these stories, right? So this is a kick Peterson's been on for a while, of looking at these classical myths and legends and stories. It's part of what his Bible series was, is, he wasn't looking at the philosophy of it per se. He was looking at the Old Testament stories, the stories of Genesis, and as stories, what do these teach us? What is the point of this on human psychology? And heroic tales are just that. And I hate how we have overused hero and heroic. A good example of that is, I think one of the problems we had post 9/11 is because of what the police and firemen at Ground Zero did. All of them became heroes. Okay, well, no, this is not to insult fire and police, but most of them, most of the time, are just doing a job and punching a clock. Those people at Ground Zero who ran into burning buildings, who stayed there at Ground Zero when the sky was literally falling, trying to render aid and assistance and evacuate people, and lost their lives because of it. Those people were heroes doing something heroic. That's not to say you can't take that idea and put it into your real life, put it into mundane practice. No, that doesn't make you a hero, but you can take these stories, whether fiction or real life, and use it to strengthen your own internal resolve, to make it easier to stand up against things that aren't dangerous or evil, like in a story, like a true hero in a story, but are still uncomfortable or painful or whatever. Just the real life stuff that sucks.
Well, we're going to sake back to earlier in this episode. It's about the preparation. Those guys were heroes on that day because they prepared for that event, even though nobody in their right mind would ever hope that event happened.
Yeah, and it was an order of magnitude greater than anything pretty much anyone thought could be.
Realistically, this actually, you brought up Peterson. He talks about it's not a good man is not a not dangerous man. It's a dangerous man who reins it in. Something to that degree. It's not. I didn't get it correct directly, but the point's there. The true measure of the real hero is someone who prepares to be the hero, but still hopes it never happens. We keep ourselves in shape, but we still don't want to have to leap out of a road to avoid a car coming at us. We make a robust body, but we don't want to have to survive a 3-story fall from a window. It's not something you want to happen, but if you're prepared, you're more likely to make it through it. you know. It's like buying insurance. It's the thing you purchase hoping never to use.
Mhm.
In self-defense, it's the skill you learn hoping never to have to use.
And this is why I bring it up. We're going to get into the real world stuff here that, as I procrastinated on the drug which shall never be named, because I wanted to talk about something else real world. And it does relate to these stories and my concern of how these heroes' tales are now being told. It's a new poll out, and Quinnipiac is considered one of the better polling groups out there. Americans were asked what they would do if they were in the same position as Ukrainians are now: stay and fight or leave the country. A majority, 55%, say they would stay and fight, while 38% say they would leave the country. Republicans say 68 to 25%, independents 57 to 36%, they would stay and fight, while Democrats 52 to 40% would leave the country. That's not great on its face, right? That so many would just up and leave. But I think it's worse than that, because I'm going to call bullshit on those numbers.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't stand up to a school board forcing regulations on your child that are at best unnecessary and quite possibly harmful, you're not standing up to a foreign invader. Bull crap. Where it's been for 2 years now, we have been living under the same kind of tyranny we're witnessing in Canada. We're just seeing it more starkly because those truckers have pushed the issue. They are calling the bluff of Trudeau and all of his, all of his little Mussolinis who want to rule you in authoritarian, totalitarian style, and don't care if they trample some old woman to death with a horse because you shouldn't have been there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Bull crap. You can puff out your chest and tell a pollster that you would stay and fight if we were invaded by a foreign country, Red Dawn style, but we have 2 years of something even less dangerous, and you wouldn't be confrontational. You wouldn't stand up.
This reminds me of an Onion article I had to pull up real quick. Yes, it's satire, but as with all the best satire, it has truth, and more truth than most men would like to admit.
Yep. You need to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
It's something we talk about in fitness because it relates very directly there. Is you want the appropriate level of discomfort to stress your body so that it becomes stronger without overstressing it so that it breaks down. And we have had 2 years now of people not being comfortable being uncomfortable. And so it's been the prisoner's dilemma, which is, you've read game theory stuff, right? I believe
Mm-hmm.
that's where that comes from. Is how can 100 guards guard 1,000 prisoners? Well, because the prisoners have no coordination. They have fear,
Mm-hmm.
and a lack of coordination holds them down. It's why in a prison situation, guards come in so strong and hard if it even looks like something's getting out of control.
Well, it's the tit for tat, and the deception versus the truth. And so prisoner's dilemma is usually the one used there. So for those that have never seen it, it's two prisoners escape, but they get captured. And if you rat out the other person, so you're separated and you're being interrogated. If you rat out the other person and they stay true to you, you get double points. If you stay true to them and they stay true to you, you get a certain amount of points. And if you stay true to them and they rat you out, you lose points and they gain points. So this whole little thing. And then the game with that is they kind of developed to do the game theory. The tit for tat is person A, person B, true. And if the other person is true, then what's the best strategy going forward to get the most points? And the original winner was tit for tat. So always starts with true. And if answered with true, they go true again. And if answered with true, they go true again. And if answered with false, they retaliate with false. And so it's always the result of the other person's move. So if the other person goes back to true, then they switch immediately back to true, and on and on and on and on and on. If it goes false again, then they answer with false. And so there's different variations of that. There's because that works the best unless we introduce something. I don't know how deep we want to go into this, something like a signal error. So it's a lie. So true, but true was a lie. So you answered with true again, and you suffer the consequences of that lie. So there's all kinds of different variations of it after that. But that's where the prisoner's dilemma came in to the game theory, and what's the best strategy for life going out of that. But I want to go back to, so we can kind of stay on task here, the numbers you brought forward. You said they're BS. I don't think they're BS, because based on what we see going on, because we do have red and blue and independents regionalized as well. And so we have the luxury of living in Texas, where we've been free for the last 2 years, right? Now that is going to skew in the direction of the people that said they would stay and fight. But you don't see them fighting because there's nothing to fight right now. Whereas those same people, if they lived in New York, that would be different, because they're under the regime of the oppressive lockdowns, the mandates and everything along those lines. So, but the people that said they would turn and flee are the majority in those areas. So we haven't had a test to that.
Well, I think you're partially right, because I actually think this goes back to your Stalin story earlier, is that we have been mostly free and we have felt mostly free, but it hasn't been great. And one of the most depressing things to me is how Greg Abbott got like 70% of the primary vote in the primary that was just held in a field of like 5 or 6, because he threw out enough barley that people forget all the crap that he did, and that he never led on anything. He was very reactionary when it came to opening Texas back up, that he never led on any of it. And there was very little pushback on a lot of this stuff. But also the other thing I disagree with is that even in a place like Texas or Florida, you still have areas where that overall policy of openness is being defied, and people are just kind of going along with it, saying, well, I mean, what are we going to do? We have to do this, we have to do that. Honestly, there are certain times where, no, you don't have to sit around and wait for a court order. Just tell them to go pound sand. We are not going to do that.
Well, I got two parts to this, to my answer to you. Is he throwing out barley, or is he reading the fact that Texans would stand up to him correctly? So is he is he throwing out barley, or does he know that it's more likely that he wouldn't have gotten that 70% if he had taken harder policy. And so his reactionary nature was reaction to the nature of the people he was governing.
No, that's true. Yeah.
Now the second part is, again, as a nation, we say New York, Texas, Florida, or whatever, but within those areas, there's pockets. Austin is not the representative of the rest of Texas.
Yeah.
Right. So again, the same people, Austin would probably flee, and San Antonio and Dallas would probably be more likely to have people around there that would stay and fight. Whereas Houston is pretty blue as well. But I think Houston would be the blue people that stayed and fight though, because they a little bit gangsta here. So
Just a little bit.
hey, okay, so this brings us to Ukraine though. This is what I was talking to you about last night via text. The stay and fight isn't always a matter of the patriotism of the people and their resolve. I just said Houston's kind of gangsta. Well, guess what? Gangs are going to say, hey, we can get government issued weapons if we stay and fight. And then when the fight is over, they're going to use all those resources they just got.
Yes.
To expand their own power locally. And unfortunately, that's the big concern in the Ukraine right now from people on the ground, reporters on the ground, is white supremacist Nazi militias are staying and fighting and getting Western weapons. Jewish militias are staying and fighting alongside them and getting Western weapons. The mafia is staying and fighting alongside them and getting Western weapons. So all these different factions that are militias and gangs basically are arming themselves in this fight. And then as soon as the Russians are repelled,
united against a common enemy, but then once that common enemy is gone.
And what Zelensky is probably thinking in his head too is a lot of these guys don't like me.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, how many civil wars, I brought this up last time, how many civil wars have we had in the Ukraine lately? It's these same factions are arming themselves in this fight.
We have not yet had a full-scale civil war in the Ukraine, despite all of its instability. So that is something of a blessing and a point in Ukraine's favor.
I should say violent uprisings. How about that?
Despite all of the corruption and all of the instability, there have been protests and riots that turned very violent, and there have been deaths connected to political activity. So now you add on, you've just escalated all of that, right? You've just escalated all of that, and we don't have to look very far to find historical examples of when this happened. And the one that jumped into my head was arming the Mujahideen, which was the coalition of various groups in Afghanistan fighting against the Soviets during the invasion by the USSR. And then once the Soviets pulled out, all right, well, then they turned on each other. And the most powerful group that rose up out of that was the Taliban. And that's when they instituted their rule over Afghanistan. And it was in large part because of the arms that Western countries had given them to fight the Soviets.
Well, on that note, I think we need to close it out because I got to get back to work. But any final thoughts?
Find good hero stories and really learn from them. Really think through what that story is saying, and then think through not to think that, golly, I wish I was a hero, I wish I could do something heroic, but just how can I use this to strengthen me in the crappy, uncomfortable things that have to be done in life, but I don't really want to do.
Yeah, thanks to all the Wheel of Time people that stuck around for the whole talk, and like, share, subscribe. We didn't give any advice. We're going to cover medical stuff next time. You can avoid it no longer. And I think I'm fully prepared, even though you said you're going to throw me a monkey wrench. But
yep, Sam's going to get to react live to something I've already watched a couple of times, and it has made me incensed.
All right. Well, hopefully you got something out of this. And if you did, hit that like button, leave us a comment, feed the algorithm, share us with your friends, and we'll do it again next time.
See y'all next time.